PKDA architect. He is widely recognized as an architect activist committed to linking architecture with social change through participatory planning. His extensive body of work spans urban planning, design, and architecture with a strong focus on affordable housing, slum rehabilitation, and reclaiming public spaces, most notably the waterfronts of Mumbai. Under his leadership, PKDA has launched the public spaces and restoring natural ecologies, a recipient of several national and international awards, including the Urban Age Award and the Jane Jacobs Medal. Mr. Das continues to advocate for architecture that fosters equity, sustainability, and community well-being. We welcome you, sir. And then we next up have Mr. Shailesh Ranjan, Business Head, Institutional Glass, and Technical Head, Architectural Glass, Asahi India Glass Limited. With over 15 years of extensive experience, he has worked across diverse functions including business intelligence, product and project management, marketing strategy, technical marketing, and business planning and operations. A certified green building trainer, Mr. Ranjan has been an active participant in several industry exhibitions and seminars, delivering keynote addresses on the evolving dynamics of glass in the built environment. We welcome you, sir. And then I also invite Mr. Sanjay Seth, Vice President and CEO of Riha Council, to please join the panelists on the dais. Let's have a big round of applause for all the panelists on the dais. I request all the panelists to please come forward for a photograph. With this, I now request Srimati Leena Nandan to take forward the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. My distinguished colleagues in the dais and all the participants of this workshop. I think this discussion on climate resilient cities could not have come at a more opportune time. Given the increasing weather vagaries, climate vagaries that we have been observing, earlier we could have said over a period of a decade, but now almost every year we are seeing unimaginable impacts of climate change on our cities. Whether it is extreme heat conditions that is transforming our cities into veritable concrete heat jungles, or it is incessant rain that has not been accounted for in the city's planning and infrastructure, and which is leading to instances of flooding, lot of damage of property, not to mention lives and livelihoods. And we're also seeing this great concern across cities about the quality of air. And that air quality, we may not think that it is the impact of climate change, but it is certainly part and parcel of everything we are grappling with when we talk about the built environment. So today, more than ever, we not only need to look at our existing cities, the infrastructure, how much we can retrofit, if at all it is possible, not just technically but also financially. We also have to keep in mind the new and upcoming urban areas which will be the cities, the towns and cities of tomorrow. Because there is more and more urbanization taking place. One unfortunate impact of unplanned city growth is that because of all the migration, we are not geared up to take care of either the people who come to our cities in search of livelihood and employment, nor do we afford them opportunities for clean and healthy and affordable living. And all of it, if we continue to treat them as individual problems, we would have ignored the larger issue of how crumbling infrastructure can actually become the biggest constraint when we talk about our dream of Viksit Bharat 2047. So our discussion not only has to focus on the cities of today, but also the cities of tomorrow. And climate resilience is one of the key aspects. But with climate resilience, we cannot confine our discussion only to the technology that can make it climate resilient. We have to talk about the capacity building. Today, when we talk about infrastructure, whether we look at the roads, the drains, the buildings, the complexes that are coming up as we urbanize, as we become more and more a consumer-oriented society, we have to keep in mind that the basic issues of India in particular, the thermal comfort that we talk about, and thermal comfort encompasses cooling as well as heating. So a country which is given to wide variations in temperature has to take into account all types of temperature fluctuations. And so our cooling action plan, India, as most of you would be aware, is among the few countries which actually came out with an India cooling action plan, and that comprised all aspects of development, and cooling in among buildings was a key aspect that is a part of the plan. So these are initiatives that have been taken, but initiatives that are confined to discussions and seminars and conferences are not going to go anywhere unless they are built into the narrative, into the way that the curriculum is being studied by all those who are going to be our engineers of tomorrow, our planners and architects for tomorrow. Unless we factor in capacity building of our urban local bodies and our development authorities to understand the implications of readiness for climate change and to change the infrastructure planning accordingly. Unless we do all of that, and unless we have clarity and a good, I would say, shelf of projects that can render themselves to retrofitting and to better implementation on the ground, unless we do all of that, we would actually not be achieving the purpose for which you and I and everyone has spared the time and energy and resources to be present in the discussion. So I'm looking forward to many aspects of climate resilient cities coming up, and then once we are with the discussion from the panelists, we can then move forward to an open house discussion, because ultimately, unless all of us are able to put our thoughts together and take it forward in a concrete and substantive manner, we really will not have made a difference to the India that we see today and the India that we want for tomorrow. So first of all, I would like to ask Dr. Kavachan Sen, and you have a very, very rich background of technology and of understanding scientific principles as well as how they can be applied to the latest technologies and practical applications of that technology. So my request to you would be to share your overview of climate resilient infrastructure and how your knowledge and understanding that can be mainstreamed with today's innovations in science and technology being applied for the cities in real time, rather than wait for a long time frame where we lose the critical momentum that we have built up. Over to you, Dr. Sir.
Thank you, and very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I thank the Council for giving an opportunity to share my thoughts and views. All of us know that in the present climate change scenario, we have been experiencing excessive rainfall leading to landslides and flash floods, then avalanche of glaciers, glacial leak outburst. Since I worked as director of 1 year Institute of Himalayan Geology, and 11 states and 2 united territories are lying into the Indian Himalayan region, I touched upon some of the important aspects under the influence of the climate change, how we can build registered a resilient climate adaptable future. So in context of the Himalaya, one example I'd like to give before you, that 2021 we experienced a glacier ice rock avalanche in Dhaliganga, and it started from a distance place where we had Reni as well as Bahuman hydropower project, number one, and that event destroyed a lot of roads, and these roads, these hydropower projects, irrigation, all these things are considered infrastructure for how to make the climate resilient. So instead of always concentrating on the engineered structure of the infrastructure, I'd like to touch on some of the important aspects. That disaster could have been saved, which killed 200 people working in the tunnel near Papuman, where the debris created by the avalanche could not make them survive because it entered into the tunnel. There was no mechanism for the early warning, there was no mechanism for the monitoring of the glacier into a vulnerable zone. So, most important part that we need to monitor, we need to create an early warning system in a vulnerable area to protect the properties, livestock, etc. This is one of the examples. Second example I will give you that in 2023 beginning we have experienced that Joshimon created a huge panic because it's developed a lot of cracks on the surface, on the road, in homes, and as well as there is a subsidence. And it created a lot of panic not only in the human being, it psychologically people are shut down. Many people, old people particularly, vulnerable people, the underprivileged people, they were under trauma. So how to get out of that? So that we found out that because of this that particular Joshimot's city was constructed on a paleo landslide material. In the slope down, there was no mechanism of understanding what is the load bearing capacity. There are a lot of infrastructure, a lot of hotels, a lot of multi-story building constructed into this region. And the load of this was one of the responsible factors for creating panic in certain situations. So we need to monitor that load bearing capacity. We need to calculate, estimate the load bearing capacity. This is the second example. Third example is very recent into the Dharani village. All of you know that a huge gushing of water, such type water that created, destroyed the entire Dharani village. A lot of homestay, hotels, there are some of the infrastructures are destroyed, 5 people are killed. But if you look into the habitation, they are on the river bank, they are on the river bed. So we need to have a very strict policy to create a buffer zone around the river so that nobody will construct up to 50 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. We have to define that in the buffer zone, it should be declared as a no construction zone. So some of the policy decisions we are lacking, some of the tools that we are talking about, the artificial intelligence or machine learning or IoT enabled early warning system, these things to be implemented along with the engineered structures we are talking about. Structure is fine, but besides structure, these are some of the issues we are neglecting, we are not bothering because there is no strict rule, there is no strict guidelines. So we have to formulate policy decisions into that direction. So in that context, we need to have a conference or conclave like this where different sectors of people, scientists, engineers, policy makers, even the local community, they should know what they should do, what they should not do. Because their role is very, very important to protect the property, structures, livestock, etc. So I will come back again. So this is in a nutshell I wanted to bring here before you that there is a time, that it is a time in the present climate change scenario, we need to develop the early warning system, we need to monitor the vulnerable zones, we need to frame the policy decisions so that the madam has pointed out that there have been unauthorized constructions, there have been unscientific way mining, many things are taking place. So we need to also prepare a guideline by which we will penalize them. They will not be able to dare to construct such things. Because whenever there is an earthquake, whenever there is a landslides, whenever there is an avalanche, it doesn't kill. It is the constructions, it is the people, the habitation, what they are making. They are not up to the level. They have to be made resilient, they have to be made disaster resilient and climate. So with this, I just talk about here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sen. I think you gave some very pertinent examples of natural disasters that have also been the outcome of climate change and that we have been completely unprepared for. And you also highlighted the importance of local communities understanding what is it that they are doing wrong. Because unless we are able to guide them and unless we are able to implement the rules very forcefully, again, a lot of our prevention principles will remain only on paper. I will move to Mr. P.K. Das, the principal architect. from PKD Architects. And what is it that you feel from the perspective of the architectural planning of our buildings, of our complexes, of in fact large factories that are coming up on the outskirts of cities? So, what is it that you think should be made more cognizant to those who are actually in the whole practice of approving and preparing plans? Because a lot of, in fact, practically everyone would rely completely on the architect, whether it's an organization or an individual. There is not much knowledge apart from having some basic ideas of what you want the layout to be like. The concept is clear, but the technical aspects are left out. So, how do you think the architecture fraternity can rise to the occasion insofar as climate resilience is required?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Sorry. Well, first, to be able to speak some relevant stuff, I have to speak beyond being an architect. I think there's been a lot of problems being an architect and with architects, with our short-sighted knowledge and approach to design and development. Having said that, let me start. I think where you left, Mr. Sen, the point that really needs to be focused on is the point that you didn't overtly mention, is build with nature. This has to be our single verdict, a single commitment. Now we need to understand what this means by building with nature. And all the examples that you gave were buildings that trying to develop in that has tried forever, and all our efforts forever, historically speaking, has been to defy nature, to build over nature, and try and tame the forces of nature. Right? So we need a paradigm shift from our prevailing order of doing things, of excessive dependence, almost an obsession on technology and engineering and high capital based investments to overcome and do these things. We have to shift to understanding nature. This is fundamental. Now, integrating buildings when it comes to buildings and development of cities or neighborhoods or clusters of buildings, as you mentioned, it has to be integrated with its surroundings first, right? We as architects talk about it, all of us talk about it, that we don't exist individually, we exist together, right? There is always a relationship between us. There is always a relationship which is intricately intertwined in nature, between the diverse aspects of nature. What we have done over the years is we've severed these relationships. We've tried to break them. We've tried to individualize them. And so the most critical point next point that I go to, madam, is how do we re-establish these severed relationships? Relationships between people and nature, both of which stand at a critical moment at this point of time. This is an interesting phenomenon. We've not just been separated from each other. Various biodiversity aspects of nature too have been similar. For example, rivers are concretized to exclude them from other relationships, ecological relationships it has with land, with water, with trees, with vegetation, with natural flora and fauna. And this is one of the reasons of all the examples that you gave actually. This sort of a breaking away of these relationships, which are intricately intertwined and interdependent on each other. And they cannot survive without each other. That's fundamental. And this is what we learn in architecture too, as architects. It's all about relationships of space with people and place and environment. And if these are looked at constantly in silos, then we are promoting and individualizing and breaking these intimate relationships. So this is the fundamental on which I've been working and thinking and spearheading some of the movements in the city of Mumbai. But very interesting. It's simple to say, oh, we all know nature. One of the phenomena is we don't know nature. So the first step that we need to take, honorable chairperson, is mapping and open data. Open mapping and data, which means not through some government surveyors, but collective neighborhood participatory mapping and data production. For people of an area and the neighborhood know their area best, they experience it best, and they must be included in the mapping and data production process. In the first session in the morning, there was a bit of discussion on the neighborhoods idea and how neighborhood-based city planning ought to be pursued is another subject that I can talk later about. The second, which is very important and very interesting phenomenon, is about seeing. We don't necessarily see all that we look at, or all that we look at is not necessarily what we see. We see only when we establish a relationship between the thing and ourselves. Seeing is an act of choice. So in this process of act of choice, we have constantly divorced our attention from seeing nature, natural ecology, the various aspects of geology, geography, and cities therefore, terrains of the cities and land that we develop on. And this act of seeing has to be reinstated. And this can only be done again through collective and participatory exercises. This is a very interesting, very well-known author called John Burgess, written a very famous book, Ways of Seeing. And I just quoted from his book actually about that, when he said to look at is an act of choice, which I've already said before. And this is the second aspect. The third, so moving on, understanding nature, mapping and seeing collectively through neighborhood and area-based effort is the first fundamental lesson that I have learned and experienced through my work. The second is being an architect. I'm pushed being an architect to say a few words about design. Now, how do we lead this discussion to sustainability, to developing sustainable and resilient cities? There are two approaches to my mind, very broadly speaking. One is design-based, of course, where the architect comes in. And it's not the prerogative of an architect, but it's design ideas. Let me put it this way. The second is the tech or technological and engineering measures that we undertake. Now, understanding nature and pursuing the environmental conditions is the first step, followed with or alongside with the intervention, technological interventions becomes necessary, not one without the other. Now, consider design-based approach and tech-based approach for two different kinds of situations in our cities. One is to do with individual buildings, and the other to do with clusters of buildings, or townships or area developments. The two are not the same as we have been approaching in our, including in Griha, to do with ratings for buildings and, carbon-free buildings or net zero buildings. In the case of clusters of buildings, there's a greater opportunity of intermingling buildings with ecological landscapes. That means landscapes are not decorative, they're not manicured necessarily, they are grass, weeds, bushes, lagoons of water, etc., etc. And how ecological landscapes can be brought in to this relationship of buildings with ecology. When it comes to individual buildings, that it's very interesting. And there are many other things that I've been talking about. Buildings must be open, porous, permeable, transparent. This means This opposes the idea of opacity and the idea of monoblocks and monumentalism. Basically, we architects have been historically led into building iconic buildings, which are expressed through these mega structures or monoblocks. These monoblocks over time are like walls being built in the city. We are walling our cities. We are dividing our cities. Ecology cannot be divided. Land cannot be divided. People cannot be divided. And buildings have become an instrument of walling cities, which means dividing places, people, and ecology. So that must be understood very carefully. The second, building blocks, when they are not opaque, they are fragmented, they're connected, you see beyond, right? You see what is beyond a building. You see the other side of the city. City stands as a witness. The third, buildings must be discrete. Now this is a very well-known planner, Patrick Geddes, had attended a conference of RIBA in London some 100 years back, where the subject was of architects, of how we could design discrete buildings. That means buildings that respond to the area, the place, the neighborhood, and the ecology. So can buildings be now overshadowed with trees, with ecological landscapes, and not stand up to be loud and proud and iconic? So the forms becomes interesting. They should not be monolithic, etc. The next is a point that Gri has been consciously dealing with, is energy conscious buildings and net zero buildings, which are all extremely important. But in that, there are two aspects which are most critical, which we have discussed in the first session as well, is the rising temperatures, the increased levels of heat that our cities are experiencing. And this has an incredible impact, or is being enhanced by our building activity, the nature of building activity, which means high density, not just of people being dense, but buildings being dense. So when buildings are compacted and many high-rises come together in close proximity to one another without adequate open space and landscapes between them and trees between them, there is a phenomenal rise of temperature. The perceptible temperatures is much, much higher than the readings that we get of heat levels at that point of time in any city. There's a big difference. I am the founder and publisher of a journal called Question of Cities, which is published fortnightly. It's free publication, anyone can access it. We have brought out an entire edition on heat island effect. And this heat island effect that we architects are the root cause of, and the bylaws and the city authorities are root cause of, is causing havoc on the mental and physical health of people. There are studies now after studies in cities like Mumbai, where slums redevelopment projects and high density building projects are now causing excessive TB in the city, because there is lack of fresh air, air circulation, lack of light, besides human conditions of privacy, and that's affecting social relationships as well. It's not just an individual's mental and physical health condition, but it's also affecting social relations in families and in communities. Now, these are very serious aspects, deeply connected between climate and people and design. So I'll kind of end with this, with just one line ending, is that how do we therefore move forward? One is the way by bylaws, which Gri has been focusing on, but not been extremely successful. How do we spread it across municipal corporations and make it mandatory in building bylaws to imbibe building with nature as a philosophy? Second, to run campaigns and popularize the ideas of sustainability, build with nature, and sustainability and resilience. So we have to start re-envisioning our cities. It's not about a building. It's not about a particular rating. It's about re-envisioning our cities based on climate response, built with nature as the mantra. Thank you.
I think that was very insightful, especially the focus on being connected with nature. And that is something that we have been moving away from. So this is the time to revisit the way we want our cities and our homes to look, and the way we want to be harmonized with nature, rather than riding roughshod over whatever natural resources that the earth has endowed us with. I will now move to Mr. Shailesh Ranjan from Asahi Glass, and I think there's a very important role that your organization would play, and the organization would be a part of larger dispensation of industries that are responsible for the building materials that go into all our structures. Glass is a very important one, and cement and steel. We all know that these all have embedded carbon footprints. So how is it that, keeping the need for climate resilience in mind, and a company like yours and the kind of industries that you represent, how are you changing the way that you go through your processes and products, and the way you influence the structures and cities that are there today and will be coming up more and more in future?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Before I start, Mr. Sen, he spoke about regional challenges of what we are doing and about the climate resilience, and then Mr. P. Das also spoke about the built environment, the challenge what built environment is about, and from there I take it to a building, and in the building how a material impacts the overall climate resilience. But before that, one thing, the mantra of everything is we have to coexist. We cannot have the climate resilient. So for me, the more important word is climate. How we can coexist along with the climate. And that is something what we are trying to do at the glass industry. As ma'am said that, okay, the overall embodied energy. So glass as a product doesn't have any carbon. So glass it's made of silica sand, and it doesn't go into the brownfield as well. So glass is 100% recyclable. So from that standpoint, glass fulfills all the parameters. But yes, while making the glass, you require energy, and to melt that silica sand, you require a lot of energy, which takes the carbon dioxide. And there at the industry level, we are working a lot towards the clean energy as well as the renewable energy to heat it, so that the overall carbon footprint reduces. And it is at the industry level we are trying to do, not only at one company level. And we all are committed towards reducing the overall carbon footprint. But I would like to take the attention to one most important factor here, is that how the material is being used. Okay, we are making a material which is in the very efficient manner, but whether it is being used in that efficient manner, and that is some part which I would like you to focus upon, is whether the glass is being used properly in India. We all know that India is divided into different climatic zones. So we have cold climate, and then we have hot and dry at the two extremes. In between you have warm and humid, you have composite, and you have moderate as well. But let's take these two extremes, which is the cold climate and the hot and dry. If you are making a building, and if you have a kind of approach where one for all, that okay, this is the best product what I am using for the building, and I am using the same product in the cold climate and the same product in the hot and dry, the same product will be counterproductive for you. I'll just take some moment to explain how it is. In a cold climate, a glass normally is defined into three different parameters: the light transmission, solar factor, and U value. I'll keep the light part aside. Solar factor and U value are something which talks about how much heat is coming inside the building through the direct solar radiation and the conduction. If you are in a cold climate condition, what's your expectation? Your expectation is that I want to keep the building heated, and the heat should not pass out. But as soon as I move to hot and dry, my requirement completely is reversed. I want all the heat which is there inside should go out, but outside heat should not come inside. So one product cannot fulfill both the requirement, and that is where I think we are facing a big challenge is the awareness about which kind of product has to be used where. And now technology has developed in such a way that we will be able to do the complete approximation or to the 95 to 98% accuracy that what kind of energy efficiency this kind of product can bring in a building. So yes, my appeal will be that this kind of scientific approach and we can take the clue of a green building, suppose Griha has the green building rating system. It very clearly defines everything that what kind of product has to be used where, how we are saving the electricity. But the truth to be told that how are we really adopting it? So adoption of that is really low in the country. And as the industry leaders, we all glass companies, we are trying to do our bit, and we try to increase the awareness in our customer segments, whether it is the builder fraternity, whether it is the end users, whether it is the fabricator, everyone. But yes, we have a long way to go, and we are committed that we will ensure that as the glass company, will ensure that the right selection has been informed to the large users, influencers and the buyers, so that when we are talking about at the macro level or how we are being a climate resilient country, at the grassroots level we are not making the mistake. And that is what I wanted to convey at the first thing, that the awareness and the adoption is the most important.
Thank you, Mr. Ranjan. I think you have highlighted a very important aspect, that it is the usage of the same material in different areas and in the same area in different times of the year that really becomes a very key aspect of our planning and construction. And also the fact that it is important for companies to also guide the consumers. So the companies should not necessarily look only at the bottom line and at how much profits and how much transactions have been made. It should also be able to advise technically, having a better understanding of how that particular material can be used or how overuse can create the very problem that today we do not seem to be anticipating. So I think the responsibility of companies also is something that is extremely important, and I'm glad you highlighted the point. I now move to Mr. Sanjay Seth from Griha, and I think it is very important for us to know, Mr. Seth, number one, what exactly are Griha's plans and how the points that have been made by our panelists, how if they are being already taken into account by Griha, then I think all of us present here would like to know, and if not, how you would propose to take care of these issues and in fact be more impactful as a rating system in terms of better outreach, bigger outreach, and therefore being more, having more of its presence in a pan-India manner rather than being confined to certain companies that are aware, certain builders that are aware, departments or even public sectors that are aware. But if it is not reaching the bulk of our country's users in terms of those who are making buildings, making infrastructure, then we are actually missing the bus, and it is most critical that we don't miss the bus at this stage. So over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I'm very uniquely positioned with a former policymaker who had the privilege of working very closely with when she was the Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and also practicing architects and scientific personnel, professionals who have spoken to me prior to that, and the industry partner sitting on the same panel. Let me, ma'am, begin on a positive note. You said that we need to really look at scales, and it's very important. Each year, the GRIA ratings that we are rolling out, or that we are evaluating, it's doubling each year. If you see as compared to last year, it is doubled this year. So I think that itself shows the kind of impact and the awareness and the sensitization that the society at large is now realizing that it's something which we cannot keep aspiring for. We need to act. And if you look at the theme of our summit this year, it's also innovate and act. These are the two key words that we have used. And of course, eventually, if we do these two things, then we will probably end up in a climate resilient world. And that's the reason why we all got together and we said that it's time to act and it's time for action. And that's where we are working. Yes, in our time, if you know, earlier on when we were working with the government, we also realized that bulk of the decisions or the policies were framed at the central level, and the implementation lies at the municipalities and the subnational levels. And that's where the problems arise. I think the architect also mentioned here on the panel that how we really need to build up capacities, because there is probably, in terms of sending the message across to the people who are really at the helm of affairs as far as implementation is concerned, I think that seems to be lacking because of maybe lack of capacities, lack of understanding, the will, political will, all of those things, I think they really come to the center as far as this is concerned. While we all speak, I think whether it is the policymakers or the practitioners, each one of them, they say that development cannot be at the cost of the environment. We all say this, but when it comes to actually doing it, that's where the challenge is. But every challenge, it throws up an opportunity, and that is where GRIA has really, captured the opportunities, that the challenges that came our way, and we converted them into opportunities. I remember many years back when I was still on the other side of the table, and was when the GRIA rating system was being evolved and it was being put together. We were looking at things. We said, okay, let's create a rating for India because we should not hate from the West, and we call it the Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment, which is very akin to our climatic conditions, the way we construct, operate our buildings and all of that. And we had a rating which was called GRIA, that's it. But gradually over the years, we have spread ourselves to introduce many newer areas, because infrastructure is a very, very wide subject. And to take care of it, because everybody wants that I don't want to be evaluated with just one scale. I should have a scale which is able to evaluate me in the uniqueness or the unique position that they hold. If it's a large scale development, we need to evaluate them on different parameters. If you evaluate a building at the local level, you need to see what parameters. Likewise, today this morning, we released the rating for infrastructure on metros. So the metros, they said, when we said that, look, we will be able to evaluate you using the GRIA rating tool, they said, no, it will be good if you are able to bring out a rating for metros for us, so that we know what we are being evaluated upon. So obviously that messaging, the right kind of messaging is very, very important, so that they are able to, people are able to be sensitized on the parameters on which we are evaluating them. So we have, ma'am, over the years evolved, and that is probably the reason why we have been able to scale up. Today, if I may use the word taking excuses, of course, from my the architect friend that we have on the panel, iconic. You said iconic building, but let's use the word iconic in the right sense right now. All the iconic buildings in the redevelopment work that is going on in Delhi, I think all of them have been registered with us, whether it is Supreme Court, whether it is the Central Vista projects, all of them, they are being evaluated under the GRIA rating system. That gives us hope. This morning we had the Secretary Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. I was very surprised to see and hear from him that he had read the GRIA rating for cities. And we said that, he says that I am very pleased to learn about this. So I said, sir, we had got this rating out when Amravati was being planned as a new capital township for the divided Andhra. And unfortunately, because of the political fallout, the city's rating could not be picked up by Amravati. That was the first project that we were supposed to evaluate. Nevertheless, I think this morning the message was, let's use this rating to evaluate our cities on an urban scale, and also look at how the people who are living out of these spaces can be integrated within the rating system, because they become central. Because, ma'am, you and me are using the cities, you and me are using the houses that we live out of, and if they are not living up to our aspirations, then I think we are going wrong. And that's what the architect, I think you also mentioned, that we need to kind of, that ecosystem needs to work together. We need to talk to each other rather than working in silos. So at Griha, ma'am, we have started looking at these aspects very, very carefully. We have a Jan Awas Nirman rating, which is for the economically weaker sections of people. There, it's a very simplified way of telling the people, going to the people and telling them why we are doing this. Why is sustainability important for you? They may not understand sustainability, but they understand the word comfort. So if we tell them that, look, the premises out of which you are going to be living are going to be comfort, they are going to provide you the comfort and safety that you are looking for, then I think they would be able to correlate with us. Lately, we are also now, ma'am, looking at another very important aspect, which in India we very, very easily forget: gender equality, right? And we have, for the first time, any rating in the world, I don't know if there is any other rating in the world which has included gender inclusivity in our ratings. We are working on it, and we are going to roll it out for the first time very soon, ma'am. Where, and especially when we are talking to the economically weaker sections, we are talking to the women folk, because they are the people who are actually staying indoors, staying in their houses for much longer period of time rather than the men folk who venture out to do their, earn their livings and all of that. So we've started, so the entire, the system around which we are generating that rating system is by talking to the women folk in those households. So I think we have, ma'am, evolved over a period of time. We are taking big strides, and of course, if we don't keep evolving with time, then we will become, it will be stagnation. And once, if that stagnation sets in, I think that's the end of the world. So with that, I think I'd just like to stop here, and I also thank ma'am for joining in, Madam Jyoti Parekh. Thank you very much for coming.
Dr. Jyoti Parekh for joining us in the panel today. She is an Executive Director, Integrated Research and Action for Development, IRADE. She founded IRADE in 2002 and was a former member of Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change. She was among the IPCC authors who shared the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. With over 4 decades of experience, Dr. Parekh has contributed extensively to research and policy on energy systems, climate change, environmental economics, and sustainable urban development. We welcome you, ma'am, for joining the panel, and I request to continue with the panel.
So welcome to Dr. Jyoti Parekh, and Sanjay, I would like to acknowledge with appreciation the fact that you have been able to scale up Griha ratings, and in fact it is going to many more directions. So any rating system is as good as the aspirational value. So it's good to know that it has a horizontal and vertical scaling up, and that is what we need so that people are conscious of the importance of having a quality infrastructure in the urban area and demanding it, and then changing the way that they approach their city and their community. Because unless the change is from within, it cannot really be sustained for long. Dr. Parekh, you have just joined us. I welcome you, and I would like to ask you, with your long experience in this area, what do you think is the biggest problem in terms of an integrated approach where we combine all the aspects that are important for good, livable, sustainable cities? What is the biggest impediment in having an integrated approach for usage of water and energy and transport, and how can we make this possible? No doubt we would be looking at a problem today, but that is no cause for us to be despondent. We can still change the way we think of things and we plan and implement things in the future. So what is your thought on a more integrated and holistic planning and implementation approach?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Nandan, as well as Kriha Council for inviting me here. I'm glad to see such a big gathering for climate resilient infrastructure. And I'm glad to see that the Kriha Council not only thinks of other things but also infrastructure as a whole. The question you asked me, I would say that every hazard need not turn into disaster if we have a sound infrastructure. Many times a lot of things happen the stable, sustainable households don't even know about it in the developed countries. In poor countries, the problem is that things are vulnerable even in the normal conditions. So, and they are makeshift things and so on, buildings, and that makes it difficult. But we are building, we have existing infrastructure which we have to strengthen, and so we have to build new structures which are sustainable. So we have, I always tell developed countries that developing countries have two problems. One is to strengthen the existing system as well as introducing the new system and new infrastructure. We looked at once at 20 cities, how they fare in terms of disaster resilience and what kind of resilience measures they need. And we came up with Higgs approach, means hazards can be prevented by strong infrastructure, strong governance, and strong services. Now, infrastructure may include water, gas, electricity. I mean, I'm talking about public infrastructure, and of course roads and power and so on. And all these have to work in unison, especially in a time of sudden disaster. And this was soon after climate missions were set up, of which I was a member, she mentioned. And we had suggested, in fact, that there should be also national mission for sustainable habitat, because people normally think, at least in those days, that what matters is agriculture, water, and so on. So 6 missions were already on card, but these sustainable Himalayan system and sustainable habitat were not, and they were added after the several meetings of PM Council. I was also in the IPCC 5th assessment. I was a member of buildings, and over there they talk about retrofitting, and they have 100-year-old buildings still. You must have seen it, they lined up in Paris and so on. You want to keep the character of that, plus have a modern infrastructure there. But here we have people with kacha houses. Kacha houses are also defined in 3 ways, whether the roof is kacha, wall is kacha, or floor is kacha. So these are the problems that are slowly, I would say since then, are reducing, but still they are there. So this class of problems also in some sense require steady rise of prosperity, which is happening, but it must be rule enforced construction and other quality norms is something that Kriha is trying to do. What kind of quality norms and infrastructure conditions we should have. For example, There's a town planning prescribes all kinds of rules. One of them is typical rule of town planning is 20% of the road space should have storm water drainage. Now here that's there's hardly any place to walk, and quite often they are under the footpaths, which are very, very large. You might have seen them abroad, and that's not possible in many of our cities, even some of their cities. But we are now trying to see in a way that the cities are planned that they don't get flooded with the slightest rain because there are enough drainage points, and we are making progress, of course, and we have to evolve gradually norms, which I'm sure the Riha Council will take it up in a priority, and with contribution from and panels, and I hope that these happen soon.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. I think you mentioned a very important point about the vulnerability of our people. The people in our cities are far more vulnerable because the income groups that are there in our cities, many of them are just eking out their livelihoods, and therefore the whole impact of climate change is that much more harsh on them. And the fact that there is retrofitting elsewhere in the world is of course encouraging, but how we can do that same retrofitting to our existing infrastructure is really a question that we would need to address. So the planning and the technology part have to take into account what we can do, because it is impossible for us to continue in the existing manner. Now we will take the questions from the house. You could ask any of the panelists. And I would also like to ask all the panelists that before we conclude, since the theme of this session is Innovate to Act, when we conclude, I will request each of the panelists to very quickly give one model, whether it is in your own area of activity or something very good that you have heard and which you would like to share. So please think about it. Before we conclude, I will request each of the panelists to give one example of a good Innovate to Act model in our country. So yes, you wanted to ask the first question. And please mention who you would like this question to be replied to.
I'm representing Future and Beyond ESG consulting firm. My question is not specific to anyone of you, that anyone can answer. What we have heard is very encouraging. We heard from Sanjay that the Bihar Council rating has doubled its certification. That already talks about the level of awareness forum like this has then Mr. Singh started with the need for early warning system. Then Mr. Das talked about data hacking and the technologies that are required. Mr. Salis, you talked about the decarbonization efforts industries are making. And then Parekh talked about the retrofitting. One aspect that we don't touch is the financing side of it. Even if you take the cost of Bihar rating, it will add 5 to 10 lakhs for certification.
So, that's the dichotomy, and that's where the whole problem is. That, when you're talking of a large infrastructure or any building that you're talking about evaluation, there are two aspects that come in the way of sustainability really being taken up to the scales that we are wanting them to go to. One is, of course, architects, they always say that there is a cost associated with going green, which is not a fair point to be making, because it doesn't cost more if you integrate it within the early stages of design. It it doesn't cost much. In fact, it costs this. And then when we operate these buildings, they keep paying back over the years. They don't, because their operations costs are very, very low. Secondly, let's look at the rating fee that you talked of. Right? What scale are we building the project? What percentage of fee is being charged for the rating? It's a minuscule amount, 0.001% maybe of the total project cost that we're talking about. We are not funded by government. We have to raise our own resources. We spend time professionally, and anything that is so that's one part that we need to look at. How do we generate revenue for sustaining ourselves? We don't make profits. We are not for profit. At the same time, in our country, if anything is given out for free, it is not, it's not valued. Even when I talked about the Jan Virya rating, we thought that let it be a CSR activity, let's give it out for free. But then we later on added a very small amount of money, I think just a couple of, I think 5,000-6,000 rupees. So that, and that also we take from the financing, because this is not largely an HFC model, but we take from, talk to the financial institutions which are taking up these projects. And we add that to it. It's really not much. We don't earn anything out of it, but it is just that we're not giving it away for free. That's the thing. But I think, just hold on. Yeah, so, but the point is that let's not, this is the reason why we've not been able to take it to the scales that I have myself worked on the regulation side, and we had a tough time when the ECDC and all of these were introduced. We could not take it because people said that this is going to add a cost to the building, which was not the fact. I say this again responsibly that it is not true, but it was a handful of people which kind of, this issue was brought into play. And then we had to, initially we said, okay, let's do it for commercial buildings, and now it is also for the residential building with the Eco-Nivas coming up. So I think we need to be mindful of that. Thank you. Yeah.
No, please take the offline conversation later on. We'll go to the next question.
So my question is to PK Das. So you were talking about the urban heat island effect, and you were talking about iconic buildings. There has been a lot of lobbying around higher FSI, higher FAR. The policies, let's say the transit-oriented development policy talked about that. But what played out actually was not what I think it was a TOD policy, it was more of a transit-adjacent development, where let's say there was a transit corridor and higher FSI was given adjacent to that, but there was no real interface between how public transport worked and the interconnectivity with the also with high-rise buildings, the way there's no real impact with the urban fabric, at least in our country. They seem to be isolated and walled, as you said. So, what is your take on urban density? Because there is a paradox there. We need higher density in our cities, we need to go tall. And because the topic is around resilient infrastructure, I think we now in India, especially in Delhi, we can't avoid going tall. That is the way forward, or seems to be. Your take on urban density, sir?
This is a very long question, but I'll try and answer you in brief, and we can continue this discussion. We've done a lot of work. I'm not per se against high-rise buildings, but when high-rise buildings are built in close proximity to one another, without adequate open space and areas for trees and landscapes, that's when the heat island effect goes up, phenomenally. And I don't need to repeat the impact of the evils of the heat island effect. That's question one, answer one. Second is about density. I have a strong view about that. It's like a dog chasing its own tail. We are causing a crime, we are committing a crime, and then trying to fix it through various ratings and technological means and interventions. Because the outside is burning, but my house inside is intact. It doesn't help the community or the city. So densities, if you look at cities, the worst sufferers of high density are the majority of people. The poor, the working people, and even the lower middle class, who constitute 75% of a average city's population, as big as that. Now these people are generally pushed, it's a very interesting game. I'll briefly mention it in a minute and wind down. You know, we are governed by FSI. We don't look, now you take a housing of the poor or a slums redevelopment project. An average house area is 300 square feet. In 1,000 square feet, we have 3 apartments, which means 12 people, with 4 persons average of family size. In a high income category or a middle income category, each house is 1,000 square feet with 4 people in it. So first argument is we need density equality at a population level, because entire services, infrastructure of a city is all based on people, not FSI. It's based on numbers of people, population. Now here there's a big disparity that we are setting out. So equality in density would have to be an absolute commitment if we have to even fight for sustainable development. It's a prerequisite to sustainability. The second, which I keep arguing as an architect, is built up density. Standards must be also addressed parallel, where buildings must have minimum open space for ecological landscapes and trees. Now, for example, bylaws in Mumbai allows 95% of a plot to be consumed by construction. I mean, that's killing the earth and the ecology. Trees are hacked one after the other, and the lobbies of the industry, of the construction industry, argue, viable nahi ho raha, viable nahi ho raha. Their incomes are not being viable, which is a false statement, but they're killing the population in the city. So where do we balance it? So density, equality, both in terms of people and construction, would have to be critically addressed if sustainable cities would have to be our objective.
Hi, good evening everybody. This is Amnik from Habitat India. So we are an ecosystem platform for clean tech startups to go and scale in built environments. My question is to Mr. Slater and Mr. Das. Current capacity of India's data centers is 1.2 gigawatt. 1 gigawatt equals to electricity over the data centers. So 1 gigawatt is equal to electricity consumption of about 1 million households. This capacity will go up to about 9 gigawatt by 2032. This is a transition and transformation nobody can stop. We house 20% of the world's data. We have less than 4% data center capacity. So it's going to happen. Now, my question is, you spoke about innovation. How is it that Reha, beyond certifications, what is the proactive leadership position Reha can take, because this is happening as we speak. We can't come back to it after 5 years. So how exactly can we speed up the scale of innovation and drive it rather than reacting to it after 5 years? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point that you make. In fact, data centers, when we were in the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we talked about data centers because they were very, very highly energy intensive, and air conditioning and all of that was very, very intensive there. So how do we really go and manage that aspect? That's putting food into our next things, things that we need to do. As I said, we need to keep evolving. We need to take baby steps. Now, data centers, I agree with you. The amount of energy that they consume, very large. So obviously, that's a big opportunity, cannot be missed. But we don't look at only energy, we look at every aspect, right? So we will definitely, this is something which we should, my colleagues are in the room. I'm sure that at the end of it, when we close the summit, we go back to our back to work. We will talk about the key takeaways from this summit, and we'll start working on it. I'd like to continue this conversation beyond the session with you outside, and then let's draw you into this, because if we have to do something new, we need partners from the industry to come and work, because data is something which you all have. And sourcing that data is something, because it's a tool after all which we create to evaluate. So let's continue this conversation. But anyway, Mr. Das, if you would like to add something. Thank you. Yeah.
Initiated urban sustainability rating and also the gender ratings, equality ratings. That was significant steps, and I'm hoping that you will.
So this is
that answer part of this question, and I don't know how we have been proactive in the larger domain of sustainability.
well, I have had the privilege of working with a lot of senior women colleagues who have been at positions of who we have learned from. There's a lady sitting right next to me. When she was the secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, our own DG is a lady, and we found that and youngsters, I think half my team is women, all women.
So this is very, very important to safeguard the people, properties and structures. This is number one. Number two, it has been pointed out by Sanjay ji also that mostly the decision is taken into the national level without much involving to the local authority or local implementers, so that whenever the policy is implemented, it doesn't go to the proper level. They don't understand really what is the need and requirement of the local people, what are the local scientific societal challenges. So that policy link should be there at the national level to the local level, so that the local issues related to the climate change can be understood well in advance, and it can be taken care by developing some of the tools, whether it is a engineered infrastructure tools, whether it is a protection tools, whether again we have to have a policy. We have to anticipate under the influence of the climate change what we are envisaging in the future. The future projection is very, very important. And if that situation happens, what is our preparedness? That is also missing in many places. That's why the disasters is becoming academic. So we need to have that sort of preparedness so that we will be able to safeguard the people not only for their health and their loss of property structures, but also to their Duma, who we have experienced at different places in the Himalayan region. Whenever they hear about the earthquake, whenever they hear about the landslides, already people started getting panic and so much that they go to. So psychologically, how will we be able to improve? That also is missing. So many things into the Himalayan region I am particularly talking about look into and we have to implement for the safeguarding of the people, for having a disaster resilient as well as a climate adaptable future for the next generations. So these two implementation, the national level policy implementation is very, very important, so that the what we are talking about today about the green climate or the green building. And another important thing I'd like to space up over here, if we really want to have a green environment, then every building should again have a policy that every building should have their self power by solar engineered system, number one. Number two, they should also have rooftop gardens so that the environment can be protected. So the complexities have to be increased. Actually, we are leading to the environment such a way that not only a high disaster resilient building will be helpful. We need to look into some other aspects that way will be able to protect the environment. Just like two examples of the roof garden, or maybe self-powered using the solar building should be solar powered engineered. So these are the things I'd like to touch upon that and say. And the most important thing that climate science is a long-term project and climate is a long-term project, and there is a awareness has to be developed into the mind of the politician. They always look into the short-term interest, because they have the cycle of 5 years tenure, so they will not bother about too much the long-term implementation of the climate-related issues. So we also have to bring this particular issue into the mind of the politicians, so that they can take further, so that we will be able to make the long-term climate research better. So this is just
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Das, any quick
Just
thoughts?
very quick 2 points. Priya, Mr. Sanjay, to add to innovate, to add, I would say network to invent, or innovate. Network to innovate. I've explained why network. Networking people and places and knowledge. The second is the commitment to decentralize and not centralize to control. How can we decentralize, which means we tap energies and knowledge skills and capacities and capabilities at every area level. So these are the 2 points I would add to our discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. When we speak about innovate and act from the glass paradigm, so we'll go back when we actually started using the glass. The basic purpose of using the glass was its aesthetic appeal and the transparency. From there, we moved towards the functional property, the energy efficiency, structural stability. We talk about the sound insulation. We talk about visual comfort. Now the innovation has moved to the next level where we are talking about the glass which is sustainable with the low embodied carbon, the glass which cannot save the electricity only but can generate the electricity also. So these are the lot of innovation which is happening and which is, as we speak, it is progressing. In addition to that, if it has to be clubbed with some kind of technological support like creating a building twin, digital twin, what we call it. So digital twin is something where you actually are creating the same building in the software and building the performance. You can actually measure that. In addition to that, you have the different softwares which is available to calculate the building energy performance before the building is actually built. But the challenge here is not all these technology which is available. The challenge is the adoption of that technology. And sir, what question you asked about the cost? Because we are looking at the cost mainly from the different perspective. So I'll give you a kind of very silly parallel, and maybe you will find it not worth, but when you will understand deeper about it, you will realize that it is actually true. We all are from some of the organization or running some organization. So we use laptop for our works. Think about if I am not using laptop, what I can do? I can work on the pen and paper easily. And compare the cost of that pen and paper with the laptop. And you will think that, okay, I will not use the laptop. We can never think about it because we will think that it is a very silly comparison. And this is the same thing I want to put the last word on my topic is this is a silly comparison that you are comparing that material which is you are using for the sustainability, for the sustainable built environment, for the climate resilience, because what you are investing here is the material which is 100% recyclability sustainable. But what you are saving is the electricity energy which is scarce in nature, the climate which is, we have seen the barriers of the climate. So this is not comparable at all. So this is the need of the hour and it is mandatory for us to do that. So that is something what we must do it rather than doing that ROIs, IRR calculation and everything. And that is something which from the innovator to the lab, this is something what I want to send a message from this forum.
Dr. Parikh.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say two things. One is we should have more and more information available on apps and so on. So if somebody designs, let's say, school, how to, I mean, we had done a study of 50 schools, how climate resilient they are, and came up with many things like, okay, if there's a fence around it, especially the big fence, it helps a lot. Then also library should be on the upper floor, and many about more than a dozen such things came out, also for hospitals and so on. But another thing, so second point would be that so this app making involving WhatsApp groups is something we did also in COVID time very successfully. We always knew which ward, which places have what, how many types of how many cases, etc. So that app development should begin. And other thing is that we should not think of here is a mitigant option, here is a resilient option. And mitigation and resilience should go hand by hand, I mean side by side. And that way we address two problems at the same time. You mentioned a glass with solar coating, so that sort of innovations also help doing both things, and I want to think of number of such initiatives. So that.
I would like to leave three things with you, and this is not something which is aspirational, it is what we are doing. Firstly, the Griha Lincoln is all the projects that we did, we have 4 additional points for completion. It's not out of 100, but it is 4, so it's 104 actually. So 4 points are given for any innovation that is brought into it. So that is number 1. Number 2, our rating has been acknowledged across the world that it does not only take mitigation into its evaluation, but also adaptation. And I think that's very important if we really want to look at resilience. So that's number 2. And the last thing that I want to do, and it's an example that we are doing in our rating, we have a rating for schools. We work with the teachers and students to evaluate their schools and then give them the rating by rechecking and re-verifying. And as a result of which, we are helping them to build up capacities of the future generations of what needs to be done. And the entire PMC schools are done with the VR rating. They are all registered with us. So I think that's another thing that we are doing. It's an innovation in our rating system that we have used, and the schools, the students and the teachers are building up capacities in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there have been some very interesting concluding thoughts that our panelists have shared. And just to sum it up, I think what Dr. Sen talked about was that one size fits all cannot be the right approach, because there is going to be wide variation across the city, between regions, between cities, between current and upcoming cities. So we have to have a very specific approach to each and every one of them, from the planning as well as implementation side. And the other thing that he emphasized was the need for early warning systems, because there is a panic that is created. So how does this early warning percolate down to the people, and what is the immediate response? Though we do have organizations like the NDMA and the SDMA, how the climate resilient infrastructure is also going to be a part of the way that the systems and the agencies respond should also be built into our early warning systems. What Mr. Das mentioned was the importance of network to innovate. So we have to build in larger coalitions, larger constituencies that are on the same wavelength, because we cannot do this in isolation. It has to be cross-sectoral and cross-cutting. I think what Mr. Sailesh Ranjan emphasized was the cost of sustainability should not really be the determining factor. Because if we look at how glass, how much is the embedded energy, but how much energy it can create, perhaps if we stop at only one parameter, thinking that the cost is going to be higher, in the long run we would have spent more. So the long-term planning is what will really deliver sustainability in its true sense. And what Dr. Jyoti Parekh talked about was information. So a lot of information is now accessible. It is possible to harness this information. So how do we build in systems where so much of rich data is available? So many good experiences and best practices are available. How can each of us who want to access this information get this readily? And you also talked about mitigation and adaptation being very critical to the scheme of things, and I'm very happy to hear from Sanjay that that is built into the Griha rating. because that is extremely important. If we only focus on the emissions from our buildings, we will miss a very crucial aspect, the adaptation and the vulnerability. And going beyond buildings, taking it to cities, taking it to schools, is actually expanding the scope and scale and doing the kind of advocacy that really will bring about the long-term change. So I think that these have been very invaluable inputs and insights, and I think you have all been a wonderful audience. You seem to have listened with great attention and interest, and some offline discussions I think have been flagged perhaps, and hopefully they will continue beyond the scope of this session. Thank you very much and all the very best to you.
Thank you, panelists, for a wonderful session. A big round of applause again, please. I request all the panelists to please come forward once again for a group photograph since Dr. Parikh has joined us later. I now request Mr. Sanjay Seth to present a small gesture of gratitude to our esteemed chair, Srimati Leena Nandan. A round of applause, please. I now request him to present the token of gratitude to the panelists for gracing us with their presence and for their invaluable insights. A round of applause, please. Let's keep the applause going. Thank you, panelists, once again. We shall now move on to bring our felicitation of our partners. We are honored to present these awards to our sponsors to express our gratitude for their support. I request the teams of the sponsors to be ready and present near the dais to receive your awards. As I call out your names. First up, we have Knock India Private Limited. I request the team of Knock to please come and collect your award. I request the teams to be ready before we call.